Oh wait, dude, I'm getting recommended all of the old no clips after that video on Star Citizen where I pulled up one of these clips 9 years ago. Largest game ever. Look at this. Look at this. This is just from 5 years ago. Well, it's actually, why is it saying 5 years ago, but it's 2018? Whatever. It's almost 6 years ago. But let's see what they were talking about 5 years ago. 5 years ago.
Welcome to The Know. I'm Ashley.
And I'm Gus.
Star Citizen has been one of the biggest crowdfunding success stories in the history of gaming. I mean, I say one of... No.
Real quick, before they say it, how much money do you think they had raised back in 2018? July of 2018. How much money do you think they raised? Because today, it's over $700 million. How much do you think they were at this time? I'm going to guess 315 million. That's my guess. 315. 70 million, 200, 100, 500. A lot of people in like the 200 range. 100 million, 150 million. Okay. It's a pretty good spread. $100 says Bethesda's Starfield will come out before Star Citizen. Well, sure did. Fact check true. You know?
No, it is the biggest success story. It's raised over $190 million since its very first...
190, way less than I thought. I thought they were at like 315. Just under 6 years ago, they were at...
No, it is the biggest success story. It's raised over $190 million since its very first Kickstarter campaign back in 2012, and it's still going.
But as the years have gone by, some fans have become disillusioned about the epic space project from Chris Roberts that promised to take PC players back to the days of awesome flight sims like Wing Commander.
Right, well since then, things have changed just a little bit. The project has grown into not one, two games, a single-player game they're calling Squadron 42, and an MMO called The Persistent Universe. But after all these years, neither one has a full release date still. They've released like some modules here and there, but still waiting for the full thing.
So of course that's led some frustrated fans to take matters into their own hands, and one
I wonder if Gus is going to say how much he had spent on the game at this point. I wonder if he'll say.
An early backer of the project decided to take them to court.
But not Gus.
Not me.
That fan was not Gus.
I was a late backer.
The fan, Ken Lord, gave nearly $4,500 to the project back in 2013, but this year he had had enough, so he took developer Robert Space Industries to small claims court in California.
But his efforts didn't work. A few days ago, a judge dismissed the case and cited an arbitration clause in the Star Citizen end user license agreement. You better read those.
You gotta read those. You don't read them, you get in big trouble like this.
And that agreement prevents anyone from taking Robert Space Industries to court for a refund.
Now it gets...
Which there's been there's been debate over like these types of arbiter clauses and things, because you'll sign it and it just like straight up prevents you from having recourse if they behave poorly, or it forces very specific levels of recourse where you have to go through certain means of mediation or any sort of other things. And it's kind of weird. It's a little sketchy, but in the US it's fine. Because again, it's the signing party's responsibility to know what they're signing. And if they don't know what they're signing, that's on them.
A little bit technical, but basically, Lord argued the game's terms of service have changed multiple times over the years, and that arbitration clause that says you can't take us to court for a refund wasn't in previous terms of services, like, say, maybe the one when he backed.
But in the end, the judge sided with Robert Space Industries and its current terms of service.
RSI was asked by Motherboard about the availability of refunds in the game, and they responded, "Our terms of service provides refunds for 14 days after each pledge is made, but company policy is to refund anyone who has second thoughts for up to 30 days after their pledge, no questions asked."
Why do they have two policies?
Well, there's...
Yeah, it's kind of like, well, then why isn't that the company policy? What?
So that they can look like the good guys when, you call up and they're like, oh, well, you're out of your 14-day window, but I tell you what, we'll do it for you.
All right.
But they got to set a cutoff somewhere, right?
Okay, I guess. They added, outside of this window, we still consider refund requests for exceptional cases, but generally at that point, the funds need to be considered available for development. This policy is actually very generous when compared to nearly any other gaming company. Most publishers would not allow any refund at all after players have downloaded and played for several hours.
That's true. That's true. But there are things that will be null and void in contracts even if signed, right? Yeah. sometimes, like, there's unenforceable contracts here in the States where, like, if I have you sign a piece of paper that says you'll be my slave for the next billion years, that's not really enforceable. That wouldn't be considered a legitimate contract, even though you signed it, because it's so ridiculous, right? It's why, like, people can leave the Church of Scientology, even though to join the Sea Org, they have to sign an agreement that they will be in service of the church for the next billion years. They signed it, but that doesn't mean that it's enforceable, right? With this, I think it's, this is why it's kind of tricky. Like, there are certain things like NDAs, which, or like non-competes, which can sometimes be deemed unenforceable, where say you worked for a game developer like like Naughty Dog or somebody, and you worked on their games, but then you were fired for one reason or another. Maybe they thought you stole some data, or maybe they just were downsizing, whatever. They got rid of you. And then you leave, but you signed a non-compete, meaning that you can't go and work for any direct competitors. So you can't go and get a job working at like an Xbox studio, even if they're the only ones hiring, right? It can cause all sorts of problems. Other industries see this problem too. If you are like an AI engineer with Meta and you leave Meta, you can't just go with those contracts and work at Apple within their AI divisions because they're considered a competitor. So there's all sorts of problems with it. And naturally, a lot of court challenges have come out where they're arguing that those are unconstitutional because, like, it's ridiculous that you just won't be allowed to work in your industry because anybody you would go and work for would be considered a competitor of the first company. But the inherent difficulty with all of this is, like, you sign something, it might not be enforceable, it might not be valid, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to afford to go through the court process of getting there. There was the recent story with that political commentator, Steven Crowder. He had one of his former employees recently sue him because he had to sign a non-compete when he left the Steven Crowder or whatever company. And he signed that non-compete, but it meant that he could no longer work in any media at all. So he couldn't work in any semblance of a media company. Otherwise, Crowder's lawyers would come and file all sorts of stuff to get him fired, and he'd have to leave. And so he's like, that I don't think is an enforceable thing. That seems ridiculous. But in order to get a judge to agree that it's ridiculous, you have to go through waves of lawyers and court battles and all sorts of stuff that is freakishly expensive. And the inherent power imbalance between the company that had you sign that and you as an individual makes it extremely difficult for it to be truly fair. Because, like, if I, as a wealthy YouTuber, go and have you sign a non-compete, but then that harms your future employment chances, and you go through waves of attorney fees and all that, that could destroy your life while you're going through the court battle. And then ultimately, the judge says, yep, you're good. You can work wherever you want. Yeah, that wasn't enforceable. Well, you just spent tens of thousands of dollars to get that answer. And now you're free, but it kind of ruined your life in the process, right? Whereas for me, it might not be as big a deal. So non-competes are always just a nightmare, and really, really toxic, in my humble opinion. But with this kind of thing, you're buying a product. And with the early, like, supporting of something like Star Citizen, it's tricky because, like, you know that you're not getting the product day one. Like, you understand you're putting money in basically for early access to something that isn't done yet. So even if the clause that said you're not eligible for a refund were considered void, even if that was not a thing that was in those contracts and the judge didn't consider it, still, it's pretty tough to argue to a judge that, yeah, that thing I did years ago, I want my money back. Like, that's a little tougher to argue, because it's like, well, you know, there were certain expectations set in place at the time. Like, I think this was always going to be a difficult case to win.
So basically, top line.
They aren't enforceable anymore. I thought it was only specific states can't enforce them, but maybe it's on the federal level. I don't know. Because I've heard lawyers that have done, like, coverage of this stuff, and they've said that, like, yeah, non-competes are not enforceable, but you still signed it in a contract, so we have to go through the court process to get a judge to agree to that. So I don't know. And I won't pretend to know, like, what these courts have recently said. I just know it's been a hot button issue, especially in my field, because there's all sorts of non-competes, NDAs and stuff that we sign all of the time to do any coverage of any game, you know?
Fine, if you're more than a month out, probably not getting a refund. And that's probably going to piss off some of the early backers of the game that have seen a lot of what's called feature creep.
That's a gaming development term for a project that gets bogged down as developers add on more and more features until it finally becomes too unwieldy.
And it happens a lot with crowdfunded games in particular because they make too much money and they're like, what are we going to do with
Let's
all
do
this
more.
money? And then, whoops, unmanageable. I mean, that's what happened to, I in fact just talked about this in the roundup today, the 1994 sci-fi classic System Shock's remake as well. That project raised more than $1.3 million via Kickstarter, but then it got put on hiatus earlier this year because the dev team said the project had strayed too far from the original vision. They got a bunch of extra money, more than they thought they were going to get, and they were like, well, we can do this, and we can do this, and we can tweak this thing, and then it ended up all taking way more than they thought it would. So they came back a few months later with plans to get the project restarted, seem to have righted the ship, so that's good. Because
And that did eventually launch. Sure did. As of news as of May 7th this year. Ooh, breaking news. FTC ruling bans all non-competes between employers and workers. Boom! Thank you, Zeeks, for that update. That's fantastic. FTC announced a blanket rule recently, but not fully official yet, so it's complicated a bit. Yeah, I think we're in like a transitionary period where it probably is like, that's the ruling, but now there's probably challenges and stuff like that. So there's things like that that complicated. With that, let's finish this out.
they brought it back to the original vision.
But Star Citizen is in a league of its own when it comes to missed deadlines and feature creep.
Now, to give you just a little idea of how much Star Citizen has changed, the game was originally planned for release in 2014, which, for those of you doing the math, is 4 years ago.
That checks out. Back in 2012, when the Kickstarter launched, the initial pitch was to build a high-end space sim for PC, which had fallen out of style with the big game publishers.
The campaign promised that Star Citizen would bring the visceral action of piloting interstellar craft through combat and exploration to a new generation of gamers at a level of fidelity never before seen.
It also said the game would be a complete universe where any number of adventures can take place, allowing players to decide their own game experience. It said players would be able to pick up jobs as a smuggler, pirate, merchant, bounty hunter, or enlist as a pilot protecting the borders from outside threats.
And then the final game would be a huge sandbox with a complex and deep lore, allowing players to explore or play in whatever capacity they wish.
So obviously it's really ambitious stuff, and again, that was in the initial pitch.
Also, you could have just said, like Wing Commander, but no.
No.
That's what a lot of people were backing, I think. Since then, virtually none of that has actually materialized. There have been some really pretty looking spaceships, admittedly, some of which were sold to players for hundreds of dollars, a few playable modules, you got your hangar, you can go look at your pretty ships. So they do have some of that stuff going on, but the games, not quite here yet.
Not quite there. The biggest content released so far has been Star Citizen Alpha version 3.0, which came out late last year.
Well, and the alpha seemed to show off some of the initial promises of the game's funding campaign. Really beautiful visuals for planets and ships you could fly around in. You could get into dogfights, even participate in a handful of missions.
But ultimately, there still wasn't much to do, no enemies to kill, and just a handful of planets to check out.
I was almost like, it felt kind of like a tech demo.
Oh, yeah. The spaceships were beautiful, but as Eurogamer noted, what is the point of owning a Lamborghini if you live in a neighborhood with speed bumps and a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit? I would say, what's the point of owning a Lamborghini if you can only look at it in your garage? That might be a better analogy.
Yeah, well, the alpha also had some major frame rate issues, and these were on servers with just 50 players, which makes me worry about a large-scale game.
As for Squadron 42, the single-player campaign, Cloud Imperium Games released an hour of gameplay footage earlier this year, and while it definitely looked pretty,
Very pretty.
Still no release date set, and some folks have felt like the MMO has taken focus away from the single-player game.
Meanwhile, all this is going on. The game's continuing to rake in cash. Star Citizen raised $34.9 million in 2017, 36.1
Just listen to that one more time.
cash. Star Citizen raised $34.9 million in 2017.
2017. It takes in
Going to rake in cash. Star Citizen raised $34.9
$34.9 million. In November of 2023, one singular month, they took in just under 30 million in a single month. So now, some months, they're doing as much money as they took an entire year to do in years past, which is crazy. It's outrageous. Why does this feel like a scam? Well, because, so I will rely on the dictionary definition. Scam definition, okay? because I don't want anybody to get it twisted. I don't want anybody to accuse me of twisting the definitions or anything. When somebody calls something like Star Citizen a scam, they are accusing it of being a fraudulent or deceptive act or operation, in this case, operation. So they're saying the offering of Star Citizen, that they're taking money for this stuff, is fraudulent or deceptive. When you look at their stores, so Robert Space Industries, if you pull up their actual online store and all that, if you pull this stuff up, you can see that they have some paint schemes that are operable in the game now. This stuff is actually available in the game now. Weapon and armor pack collection, $60, all that stuff. This is to actually get the game. Then they have further ships and things like that. Constellation Aquila, view specs, view buying options. It's $315. I've played with people in the game that are flying this ship, that are actually using it. So this is in the game. It's $315, but you can buy the ship and use it. So this isn't fraudulent. It's not deceptive. You are paying money and you get this thing in exchange for your money. So that's not a scam. Where I think people feel like it's more of a scam is buying ships, for example, that are not available yet, which is more fair. I think that makes more sense. There's like the big Javelin that they have. Those are over 400. Some of these ships have not even seen the light of day and don't exist yet. They're just in the concept phase. They haven't actually been released. Is the Perseus out yet? I don't actually know. In concept. So like this stuff, if you were able to buy it, that would be weird, because it's like it doesn't even exist yet, but you're buying it when it doesn't exist yet. As far as I'm aware, you're not able to buy this, but maybe there is a way that you could pull it off. I don't know. But there's a lot of ships like this that are in concept. There's others like this one available now in the game. You could play with it. So this stuff, I don't think fits the definition of a scam. Squadron 42 is the other side of it, which is the single player game that has like Mark Hamill in it. And you could say that's a scam where they've taken money in through these pledges to put that out, and it still has not seen the light of day. That one, again, if they were taking, does anyone know, are they taking money specifically for Squadron 42? Is there a way to buy Squadron 42 right now? Like a pre-order kind of thing. Is that available right now? Yes, Sacred or Scared, I can't read it. Scared Crowns, thank you. It's feature complete now, and no, you can't buy it. It's in all the packages. Oh, so like the starter package to get access to the current like connected universe thing. This includes Squadron 42. Citizen, self-landed hangar, starting money. It doesn't say Squadron 42, but maybe that's just something they've mentioned elsewhere. But either way, so if that's the case, you could say that maybe they're taking money and they're intentionally going to pocket it and not do anything with Squadron 42. We do know that they've shown it off. They say it's feature complete. They say they're in the polishing phase and refining it and everything. That's in process. But the term scam has very particular meanings, and that, as far as I can tell, Star Citizen doesn't meet those. Are they wildly, have their expectations and goals wildly grown? Yes. This game was supposed to release a literal decade ago in 2014. So absolutely fair to say that the game is totally different from what they initially wanted it to be. But it's grown and shifted with the money that's come in, and they've changed their expectations and what they're trying to do. They've also shown some crazy impressive tech. So they've actually developed stuff that is wildly impressive. Like this Star Engine demo that just like took a mean, dirty, I don't even know what on Starfield. Like this whole thing felt like a personal attack against the game. Wildly impressive tech. So they've shown this stuff off, and you can play the game right now in the version that they have. Mark Hamill will die before this is out. Don't taint it. Somebody already said, I'm predicting now Starfield will be out before this game. Because when this game, like when that video we just watched was out, it was in July of 2018, just after they had announced Starfield and The Elder Scrolls 6. And so to say Starfield was going to come out before this was like kind of a ballsy prediction. And then it ended up actually happening. So I don't know when or if this game will ever launch. I know there's people in it playing it right now that are happy with the money they've spent and are happy with what is in the package as of right now. Just like any other early access game, you might spend $30 on it, get in early, play the game when it's not feature complete, and then you can still feel like your money was well spent before you see the final product.